I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, so I'm not a native Minnesotan, but I would consider Sioux Falls to be maybe greater Minnesota. It was the Twin Cities were the place that we'd come for the Twins game or the big concert or the Dayton shopping trip. We didn't really spend very much at Dayton's, though. My dad was a band director. My mom was a homemaker. And they were both farm kids. They grew up on a farm in central South Dakota. And we still own that farm, by the way. It's 80 acres of homestead property, and it's in the Conservation Reserve Program. We basically farm it to grow pheasants. And I can tell you now that one of my colleagues has left, I am the best pheasant hunter on the Minnesota Supreme Court. I don't know about the coming year. Anyway, you would think, as the son of a band master and a homemaker, why would I be headed to the law? Well, it probably has to do with what happened at our dinner table. The conversations were very lively and sometimes would be argumentative. And sometimes my dad would put his hand down on the table and say, "I've ruled and there's no appeal." But the conversations from the time I was age 6 to the time I was maybe age 18 were sometimes hot because that was a controversial period in our country's history. There were the assassinations of President Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King. There was the Vietnam War, which was very divisive in our society. There was Watergate, which really put law front and center in our nation's dialogue and kind of got me thinking about the law. Almost led to his impeachment. He resigned from office. So all of that was kind of front and center as I was growing up. What really got the law on my radar screen, though, was high school debate. As I mentioned, I was pretty good at arguing, and I found that to be true in high school debate. And the topic my senior year was, should the jury system be significantly changed? And so I found myself traveling down to Vermillion, South Dakota to the University of South Dakota Law Library and kind of got deeply into reading about the law, reading about famous judges and lawyers, and that made me interested in becoming a lawyer. When I went into college, I was still kind of undecided. Am I going to go into music or am I going to go into law? And the first class I had in constitutional law is what really tipped me. My professor taught in an unusual fashion. He taught by using the Socratic method, where he would ask questions and then you would have to think about the question, answer the question, and sort of teach yourself. And you know, now that I think about it, that's kind of what we do on the Minnesota Supreme Court when we're sitting on the bench. We're asking the lawyers questions and we're trying to learn by asking questions and thinking about the answers in our mind and finding the truth. So that's kind of what tipped me toward being a lawyer. I went to Augustana College where I had that constitutional law class, and interestingly, that prepared me very well for Harvard Law School where I went. That was a pretty big deal for a South Dakota kid to go from Sioux Falls to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I would say about 40% of my classmates were Ivy Leaguers. I did not know how little money we had until I arrived at Harvard Law School and saw the lifestyles of some of my classmates. It was pretty fast company and I had to work hard to keep up. In fact, one of my law school classmates was a guy named John Roberts. I didn't get to know him very well. I sort of regret that because he's now Chief Justice of the United States on the United States Supreme Court. So I went to Harvard Law School, then after that became a law clerk to a federal judge back here in Minnesota, and then my law career was off and running.